A roar of automatic gunfire erupts. It shatters the peaceful hum of the family shopping at the Delhaize supermarket in Elst, Belgium. The atmosphere turns from one of weekend leisure to sheer terror in a heartbeat. Parents frantically grab their children. The masked men move methodically throughout the store, their guns spewing death with each pull of the trigger. 8 lives are snuffed out in a matter of minutes. The assailants' motives are unclear, and as abruptly as they arrive, they vanished into the chilling November night. This nightmarish event marks the last known act of the Brabant Killers, whose reign of terror left a scar on Belgium's soul. Who are these heartless killers?
How could the Brabant Killers be connected to NATO, the World War II alliance? Well, stick around to find out.
The shooting in the supermarket was not an isolated incident. The nightmarish event was only the final chapter in a series of blood-curdling crimes that plagued Belgium for years. The culprits? A criminal gang known as the Brabant Killers, and their span of terror started in the mid-1980s. This wasn't just a group of petty criminals. These were cold-blooded killers who seemed to revel in chaos and suffering that they caused. The Brabant Killers, or les Tueurs de Brabant, in French, were definitely the 80s version of terrorists. They weren't blowing things up, but they were terrorizing. They became responsible for a string of violent robberies, assaults, and murders that left the country in a perpetual state of fear and dread. The gang's modus operandi, which we'll get into, was perplexing and brutal. They stormed commercial establishments, heavily armed and masked, and unleashed a torrent of violence that seemed senseless. Money, sure, it was stolen. The brutality inflicted went far beyond what would be necessary for a simple robbery. Were they part of a criminal organizations? Were they lone wolves? Is there a political agenda here? So if you're intrigued by this, make sure you follow the channel for some updates. It's a free way to really support the show and help get the word out there. The early crimes were a combination like robberies and assaults, and we'll go into kind of a timeline of that. So March 13 in 1982 in Dinant, Belgium, this is the gang's first known attack. It occurred at a small grocery store, and shoppers were just going about their usual business, and the door burst open, and men in balaclavas, armed with military-grade weapons, stormed in. They fired shots into the ceiling, sending customers diving for cover. The cash register was emptied, but not before one of the customers was shot and injured. As quick as they came in again, they were gone, and the community has been shocked. At this point, not really in the loop that there's about to be a spree. This is just the start. So on September 30th in 1983 in Beersel, Belgium, the gang breaks in, and they don't just shoot in the air. They shoot a cashier, customer, both who survives but were completely left traumatized. The gang takes a small amount of cash and takes off into the night. On December 1st, 1983, in Anderlues, Belgium, the Brabant Killers targeted a jewelry store. The owner and his wife were both shot and killed in cold blood. The store was looted, and witnesses described the killers as cold and methodical. They even took their time selecting specific pieces of jewelry while the owners lay dead on the floor. So on May 25th in 1985, there was 2 supermarkets attacked by the gang in Overijse, and 8 people are killed, including children. And again, the brutality is escalating. So it started out with the robbery part and some violence, and now like everybody they're coming into contact with is dying for the most part. I can't imagine what the country is going through at this time now, because it's been 2 years of senseless violence by a gang of terrorists just doing whatever they want. The MO of this gang, or the modus operandi, was not entirely clear probably at the time, but as the years went on and obviously the fear just instilled in this population, people started to understand more and more, and so did the police. In this case, the gang themselves displayed a chilling efficiency and disdain for human life. They were heavily armed, often with weapons that seemed excessive for the crimes they were committing. Victims and witnesses spoke about a methodical, military-like approach to the violence. They seemed to relish in the chaos and the fear they instilled, firing shots not just to kill, but to terrify. Money was stolen, but it seemed almost incidental to the gang's true motive, which
May have been much, much darker. So there's a theory circulating on the internet that seems to have kind of a lot of credibility, is that the Brabant Killers might have been part of something called Operation GLADIO. So if you haven't heard of what GLADIO is, let me explain it. GLADIO was a clandestine NATO operation that occurred after the Cold War. Basically, they left stay-behind armies covertly in Europe to prevent any future Soviet uprising. Specifically, these units were trained in guerrilla warfare, sabotage, and other covert operations, assuring they could operate behind enemy lines if needed. The existence of Gladio wasn't confirmed until the earlier 1990s when Italian Prime Minister revealed it to the public. Obviously, a lot of people weren't happy about it, and as usual, we're finding that our hard-earned tax dollars are being spent by our government on things that no taxpayer would ever approve of. In 1990, the Belgian Senate produces a report that completely acknowledges the presence of the stay-behind network in Belgium, and it also reveals that Gladio was active in countries like France, Germany, and Greece. There's been a lot of kind of clandestine activities linked to these guys, and I'll list a few. The Piazza Fontana bombing in 1969, the Battano bombing in 1972, the Bologna massacre in 1980, and of course, the Brabant killings. Why would government operatives as part of Gladio do this? Well, it was to create political instability, allowing governments to enact more authoritarian control over the population. So the report from the Senate basically outlines how Gladio authorized domestic terrorism to manipulate public opinion and political landscapes. This included bombings and assassinations, often blamed on leftist groups, to instill fear and justify more stringent security measures. Seems crazy, but we see this time and time again. The Brabant Killers specifically, their reign of terror, which lasted over 3 years, created mass political instability. It left 28 people dead, and the ruthlessness and precision of their attacks suggest that they had to have some kind of military training or support. Some believe that high-ranking officials turned a blind eye or, even worse, facilitated these attacks. While no concrete evidence has ever proven this link, the similarities between Gladio's covert tactics and Brabant Killers' MO leaves us completely unsettled with this. These aren't seemingly random attacks. These do seem to be part of a violent and calculated effort to spread fear and chaos, whether or not that motive was political. The shadowy connection of Gladio adds a dark layer to an already horrifying mystery that isn't just the Brabant Killers, it's also what humans are willing to do in the name of political control.